And welcome to episode 2 of Cyber Uncovered, AI turbocharging cyber attacks. The session today, the slides are available if you're watching live. There is a material section on screen, so you can download a PDF copy of those. And I guess from a housekeeping perspective, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask and it prompts anything, then please do enter them into the Q&A section, and if we have time at the end, then I will go through those as well. But let's get on with the action-packed session. So what are we talking about today? So a little bit about Mitigo, not too much, but some of you might be new to who we are and what we do. So I will give you just a few lines on that. Then we're going to talk about how criminals are weaponizing AI. Pretty interesting how things are developing and how quickly they're developing. The things that you could and should be doing to help protect yourself against these increasingly sophisticated attacks. And a slight change to the advertised agenda is we do get asked by quite a lot of people about the security considerations that you should have in mind when you're using AI within an organization. The difficulty is it's not all security. Some of it is more to do with data security and data protection, and also the use of these platforms. But we're going to shed a little bit of insight as well, which hopefully you'll find interesting. Mitigo, we are a cyber risk management organization. As many of you will know, we work predominantly but not exclusively in the professional services sectors. So we work within the legal sector, accountancy, financial services. We work with the Royal Institute of British Architects and many, many others. Effectively, firms that take their cybersecurity seriously, partner with us so we can keep them, identify their gaps and keep them safe. Importantly, we are not an MSP or an IT provider. We do not provide IT services. We would actually work alongside you or your IT firm in order for us to identify that risk, because we're a completely different discipline to your IT, identify that risk and then help you control that and give you the assurance that you're controlling that risk appropriately and certainly in line with your regulatory and legal responsibilities. We're CREST certified, so if you're looking at penetration testing, you would always look for someone with a CREST badge. We're cyber advisors certified by the National Cybersecurity Centre, and we can also certify for Cyber Essentials Plus, and IASME Cyber Assurance. So there's all manner of things that we can do to help firms. But on with the reason why you joined today. So the truth is that AI is being used by threat actors. I don't think that's a surprise. We use it in our everyday lives. It's used for good, and of course it's now used for bad. And what were once ordinary attacks are now, if you like, relentless, but they're adaptive threats. They're faster and they're smarter than they've ever been. And I think that's the key. Is AI, as we know, if we use AI in our everyday lives, it just makes life easier because it automates an awful lot, and of course it learns how to do things. So it's allowing threat actors to scale their operations. Unfortunately, it's allowing them to bypass traditional defenses. I mean, the truth is that threat actors that don't use AI can bypass traditional defenses, but this is another level because it can automate it. What that does is it increases the amount of, or it lowers the bar of entry for cyber criminals, because AI can do the work into breaking in and breaking through some of your perimeter defenses. And obviously what it allows them to do also is to exploit the vulnerabilities that you have in place. And I suppose the big question is, are you ready? And as we go through this, I guess you'll be the people that will be able to answer that question. So let's look at some of the ways in which threat actors are using AI to help them. So what you'll notice here is some of the things are things that we already get impacted by. So for example, phishing emails. So we've all been receiving phishing emails for for years, I guess, and some of us will receive one today at least, but what we are able to notice is quite often is that they're not very accurate, or the language might be poor, or the grammar might be poor, because the threat actors are abroad in a different country. English isn't their first language, so the emails aren't particularly sophisticated. With AI, they can craft a very convincing and grammatically correct email to send to you. But not just that, they can also they can make the email look far more realistic by putting logos in. If it's looking to come from a regulator or from a client or something like that, then it can really mimic what it is that you're receiving, and that's going to trick a lot more people. So I guess that's just in a similar way that we use AI, or you might use AI to go and ask it a question, or to create some form of image in your own day-to-day work. Voice and deepfakes, I've seen quite a lot of examples out on the internet of how this is used, and unfortunately I've spoken to a few people where this has been used to great effect as well. It's interesting, if you go back 18 months, 2 years, in order to be able to create some form of deepfake video or voice, it might take the engine quite a long time to put that together, but now we're starting to see that technology gaining traction very quickly, and so AI can now clone a voice with a very small piece of information, and then obviously the face. We've all seen things that have been sent to us, perhaps through social media, where literally it can take a still photo and then animate that to make you do all sorts of things. In the business world, how is that being used? Well, quite often you could have a threat actor making a phone call where it's mimicking the voice of a person that you may know or trust, or indeed joining a Teams call and being able to dupe you into thinking you're having a meeting with somebody that you do know. And that's been used to great effect, unfortunately, across the globe, and we are seeing people pay money where they think they've had a meeting with, let's say, their finance director, who's instructed them to send monies to somebody, but unfortunately it's been the threat actor that's been on the call, and it really is happening. Chatbots for scam. So, from time to time we will use chatbots, but it can engage victims, as it says there, into real-time conversations to extract information from you. We often think we're talking to a human being. I think sometimes it's obvious when we're not, but AI is getting better, and it is going to trick more and more people into believing that you're having a genuine conversation with someone who you think it is, but it's probably going to end up not being as time goes on. And I think we all know that social engineering is used effectively already from a threat actor's perspective, but what we're seeing is that AI can analyze great volumes of data, and it can search far and wide very quickly for information that is held about you. We all put stuff out there, be that on LinkedIn or be that on personal social media platforms, Facebook, Insta, whatever it might be. And of course, what they can then do is they can pick out who it is they want to go at. They can then use some of that for deep faking, or they can tailor the attacks to the people that they've decided that they want to target within from the information that they've gathered. So unfortunately, AI is going to be used more and more in order to help the threat actors trick people into clicking on things or doing things that you don't want them to do. If that's not enough, if we think about that, that's kind of trying to get past your perimeter security. That's tricking the human beings. But what we're also starting to see is how malicious software or malware is starting to develop as well. And for those of you that were hoping for us to have a section on evasion polymorphic malware, this is the time for us to talk about it. But this is where it's capable of attacking the technology that you have, and far more automated, far more intuitive. And so I'll go through them one by one, but automated vulnerability discovery. So what AI is able to do is to scan a system or some software and look for the exploitable weaknesses. So where previously you would have a hacker, a typical hacker that's trying to break in, the AI can do it for them, and it can find the weakness, and then it allows them in, and then they can carry on and do their work. But what it can also do is it can adapt its strategy, and I think this is quite an interesting thing that's happening. The part that I think's interesting is it depends on what kind of antivirus or endpoint protection you've got, but typically basic antivirus is looking for behavior that it recognizes, and what it's going to do is it's going to adapt so that it doesn't look the same as it goes through into networks. So it's going to make it far more difficult for those pieces of software to pick it up. And then when we talk about polymorphism, that's kind of where that links in, is it's going to change its appearance every time it comes in. So what you're going to find is when that antivirus or your security systems are looking for something that it would recognize, it just says it's changed, so it doesn't recognize it and it lets it through. This is going to make it far more difficult for systems to capture the malicious software as it comes in. It's not going to be impossible, because remember, and look, it's easy, I think, to scaremonger when you talk about these things, but the purpose of this is to make you aware of how it works. But remember, when you've got AI being used for bad, you're also going to have AI used for good, and it's going to be warfare as to who wins, I suppose, over time. And as we go on through the session, we can talk about the things that you can do about it. But the point is, you must do something about it, because it's becoming ever more sophisticated as well. So, moving on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about credential stuffing and brute force attacks. So you may well have heard of both of those, and just to give you, just to sort of break down what they are. So credential stuffing is where attackers have stolen usernames and passwords. So these lists are typically available on the dark web for criminals to use. You find out, you get a little email sometimes, don't you, or a text that says your credentials have been exposed somewhere and you need to change your password. Well, literally, that's where those usernames and passwords end up in a list of millions and millions on the dark web for sale. So what criminals do is they use those lists, their known usernames and passwords, and they just throw them at platforms to see what they can break into. So that's credential stuffing. So that's using credentials they have. Brute force attacks, slightly different, which is where they will effectively guess the password. So the usernames typically are going to be email addresses, but they won't know what the password is. But what AI can do is automate this, and it can use far more combinations far more quickly in order to break in, and it can do that both with credential stuffing and brute force attacks, which I guess is scary. And we dealt with a firm not too long ago where we saw it was a ransomware attack, and we'd seen that they'd had about 200,000 brute force attempts at their firewall in order to get through, which eventually it did. So these things do happen, that they do work, and so you've got to make sure that you've got your protections in place. That particular firewall failed because the security was weak on it, and nobody had really identified the problems that were there. Moving on. I think this one's quite interesting. So I guess this one, I don't know if it annoys you. It certainly annoys me when I'm trying to log into something and it's or try to get to a website, and I've got to work out what these letters and numbers are, or I've got to tap on whether I can see a bicycle or some traffic lights or things like that. These are designed obviously to stop AI and automated bots from just being able to automatically log into their pages or their sites. The issue, of course, is that AI is now learning to be able to deal with capture, and so that will become more and more sophisticated as time goes on. But I think it also just highlights and demonstrates how AI is evolving as well in this area. I think it would be quite cool to be referred to as the bot master, but what on earth is the bot master? Well, what we're seeing now is that so you get botnets, and what they are is a network of computers or devices, and they're effectively all infected with the same malware. Think a bunch of drones, if you like, and then they're all remotely controlled by a central criminal, cyber criminal, who would be called the bot master, therefore using these devices to conduct their work. It's obviously very complex, but when you've got AI being able to carry out the work, it's going to become far more difficult, or far more easy for them to get in to do what they want to do. And as you can see, we can even see AI is now starting to manage the encryption process, the negotiation of ransoms, and even adjust how they demand, or how much they demand, by taking into consideration the victim's profile. If you consider that last year the average ransomware payment, or sorry, in 2024, the average ransomware payment in the UK was 1.5 million pounds, and the National Crime Agency came up with that number. You know, not every organisation can afford 1.5 million in a ransom, but if you're using AI to conduct your negotiation, and it can see your systems and look at your bank accounts and understand who you are, then it will come up with a number that's far more reasonable, should I say, for you to consider paying. And of course, a lot of people do pay the ransoms because, you know, if someone said to you, would you pay £100,000 or be down for a month? Some organisations would sit there and say, I'll pay 100 grand, but it could be more relevant to you. It could be 10 grand. It just depends, really. But anyway, that's interesting. So what can you do? Well, the first question that I think I would ask anybody that joins this session, or watches this session on demand even, is who is responsible for your cyber risk management? And I think too many organizations come up with the answer that it is their IT provider. And I'm not saying that your IT provider doesn't play a part in this. Of course, they have a responsibility for or an involvement in your cyber security, but cyber risk management is different to having endpoint security. It's just a different beast. It is a board level responsibility. If you think about it, if this all goes wrong, if you are the victim of a ransomware attack, or your data is stolen, or your client pays an invoice because criminals have faked one of your invoices from your systems, it's you that's going to end up paying the bill as the owners or directors of businesses. And so you've got accountability for it, and it's not something that you can just palm off and say to your IT firm, you know, I need you just, or just to assume they're doing it. I think that's probably the biggest thing we see is companies assuming it. But what you do need is you need the right information to make the right decisions. And I don't think, from our experience, we see a lot of boards that don't have the right information to make those decisions. A, because they're either thinking that it's being taken care of, or they don't know what information they need. And so what can you do is you must get a risk assessment or an audit of your risk profile carried out. That's going to allow you to be able to develop your cyber strategy. And so that risk assessment, if you like, it gives you information about what your risk looks like, and then it allows you to make informed decisions. Quite often what we see with organizations is that they are being told that this would be a good idea to do, but it's not based on any form of assessment of risk. And therefore, whilst it may be a good idea, it could also be pointless, or it could even be a waste of money. And what a risk assessment it does in allowing you to drive your strategy is allows you to make informed decision based on fact. And so quite simply, there are three elements, if you like, to effective cybersecurity governance. So if we've got risk assessment here, which is to identify and prioritize cyber risk, it should be independent of your IT provider because they're marking their own homework. They're part of your supply chain. So you should have somebody that's taken a helicopter view with the right expertise over the top of you and them, because the scope of that risk assessment should also be wider than just technology. If you think about it, your IT firm are only ever going to look at technology, or generally they only will, but actually cyber risk management needs to consider people, so behavior, behavioral risk, business process, yes, your technology, but then your policies, your governance, and it needs to be assessed to see where your gaps are. What we can then do from carrying out the risk assessment is we can establish what policies we want, so what technology we're going to use, how we're going to configure it, what policies we've got for the users, because not all cyber risk is managed by technology. You've got to have policies in some areas to tell people what they can and can't do, but you need to identify what they are through the risk assessment. That allows you to assign clear responsibilities and accountability within the organization, or with your cyber risk management partner, or with your IT or MSP provider. And what it also does, obviously, is it does foster a culture of security awareness throughout the organisation. And I think that's really an important thing, is that it's everybody plays a part in this, because criminals often target employees and the people that work within organisations. And so, let's get them involved, let's get them trained, let's test them, let's make sure we're doing regular phishing emails as well. But it's not a one-time thing. You've got to keep doing it, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is there are legal and regulatory requirements for many of you out there to be conducting regular risk assessments, and you should do that to continue to prove that your controls are effective and that you know and you can demonstrate that you've understood your risk and that you're controlling it. And you will change over time, and cyber criminals change over time, so you've got to keep adapting to the evolving threats. If you go back a couple of years, MFA, multi-factor authentication, was the gold standard, and it was the silver bullet to stop criminals getting into your systems. That was soon bypassed by threat actors. They can get by that. You should still have it, by the way, because it's a layer of security. And then we moved on to conditional access. But I think there's still we know there's still an over-reliance on conditional access, and actually it's often not implemented very well or correctly. And so again, something that was the gold standard perhaps just last year or the year before is being bypassed by criminals because it just isn't being put in place very well at all. That's where the independent assurance and oversight comes in from a third party. So yes, I am extolling the virtues of an organisation like Mitigo, but I think it's important, and it's important because independence gives you an unbiased evaluation. Not only is your internal IT marking their own homework, but they're going to sell you the solution on top of it. What independent assessors do is bring, as it says there, a fresh, objective perspective and identify risks and make recommendations that you may or may not choose to take on board, but at least you can make the right decisions because you're being given correct information. Obviously, that's going to give you an enhancement in your overall risk management posture. It's going to make you more compliant with things like GDPR or your own regulatory providers, and it will give you, as we've already talked about, far more guidance on your strategy. It gives, if you've got investors in your organization, it gives them confidence, or it just gives the other members of the board more confidence. And actually what it can do is give your staff confidence that you're taking these things seriously. More importantly though, and I've already mentioned it, is it does allow you to adapt to the evolving threats that are there. Obviously, you've got to consider that cyber attacks are inevitable. So what you do now is important. It will help you. So things like incident planning and response, please make sure you've got an incident response plan if it does go wrong. As it says there, nearly 80% of businesses don't have them. We're starting to see more and more businesses put them in place. They're a little bit unsure on how to do it, so a bit of guidance doesn't go astray on that. But you really should test it because there's nothing like going through a real attack and then realizing that your incident response plan doesn't actually work. So I'd recommend testing it. It's actually a requirement under the Cyber Governance Code of Practice from the government that was introduced last year. If you are attacked, then you've got to consider backup and recovery. So the question that I would ask you to ask yourself is, if your systems were encrypted by ransomware today, how confident are you that those backups would restore everything without you losing any data, without any infrastructure? And who's given you that assurance that that will happen? All too often we hear businesses say, oh, I'd be up and running within 3 or 4 hours. Okay, but how do you know that backup isn't going to be compromised as part of the attack? And the answer to that is often that they don't know whether that's the case or not. Nobody's given them that assurance. And yes, it is important to understand how long it's going to take you to get back up and running, but also then, as part of that incident response, perhaps is to make sure that you run simulated events there as well. If you don't know the answer to any of those questions, then obviously you can talk to us about it. So just with a few minutes left, that's AI and how it's assisting the world of the threat actor, the cyber criminals. And I think there's some really interesting things in there. And I think it's going to get more and more complex and even smarter, unfortunately. But the question, as I mentioned at the beginning, of a lot of people ask us is, what are the considerations that should we have if we want to implement AI tools? So, as I say, it's not necessarily cybersecurity, but let's have a chat about it. So, how does AI work in the platforms that you'll be using? So you might be using Copilot, ChatGPT. There's loads of them out there, and we're being sold them all the time. But effectively, the way that AI works is that it has to have a set of data, and it's called an LLM, a large language model. And of course, the more data and information that you can put into the model, the more it can get out of it, and more it can help you. So you put information in, and then you train it with all of this data, and then you have to tune it, yeah. And then what happens is it needs to be prompted, and it needs to be tuned, and it needs to be it needs to have valued, if you like, to make sure that it's being constantly assessed and improved. Think about it. AI is not sentient, okay? So it's going, as I'll talk about in a minute, it does spit out incorrect information because it doesn't always understand. But the more it is trained, the more it is tuned, the more information it has, the better it will get over time. So that's how it works. And so because they rely on having all of this data, some of it's obviously, it depends where it's taking it from, but it could be commercially confidential information, personal, sensitive. As an organization, from a data security perspective, ensure that that your team are not putting in confidential data into public AI tools unless you let them, because but then you need to understand obviously whether the tools you're using are ring fenced and it's not going to the LLM or it is, and you need to know that. You need to know any data you put in it, where it's going to end up, and not just that, which jurisdiction, because your AI vendor is going to host that data. Where are they hosting your data if you're going to put anything confidential into there? And you might have a regulatory or legal obligation to understand that. Obviously, we'd recommend that you minimize and anonymize any data that you put in, so not names of your clients and things like that. And that, of course, you've got some form of MFA to get into it in the first place. AI has got better. I've noticed it over the last year or two since we've been using it. As I say, everybody does, but it's still not entirely accurate. It's not accurate all the time, and it can have hallucinations, and it can also bring out information that's just made up, because it's only as good as the information that sits within the LLM. And so let's have some human oversight to anything that's coming out that you're going to rely on. Let's not just be sending it straight out to clients, and let's consider who's using it in which departments across the organization, and let's make sure, as I say, that we just know that it's accurate information. I think it's there to, if you think about it, ChatGPT, Copilot, they're there to say it works alongside you. It's not just doing the job for you. Again, from a client business confidentiality, if you're using it and it spits information out to you, who owns that information? I think that's important for you to know. So if you're making it generate images, do you own those images, or do you own the information that comes out of it, and can you use that? And then also, and I think probably one of the most important things is, how do you prevent employees from unintentionally sharing either proprietary material that you've got, copyrighted material or IP, confidential business information, or client data into AI tools? There's an example there on screen. It was a couple of years ago now, but some engineers at Samsung put some code in there that was worth an awful lot of money of a product they were developing, and of course that information was then part of the LLM, and anybody that wanted to search for it, it became available. So from a governance and accountability perspective, is to, you need to ensure that you've got clear ownership for AI deployment, the security, and some oversight. So if you're using it, making sure that you know that it's having policies around it. get it included as part of your risk assessments, and then define with policy to your staff what they're allowed to use, what they're not allowed to use, when they're allowed to use it, and what circumstances. Really important stuff. So as I draw to an end, and we won't have time for questions today, I'm afraid, my thoughts are this: cyber risk management is complex. We know that anyway. It is a leadership responsibility. It's not the same as IT, and you really should take expert advice if it's something that's keeping you awake at night, or if you're just not sure whether you've got things sorted. Your regulators, your clients, your supply chain, the government expect you to do it, and you should be doing it. We can help you. And we're just going to pop a little poll up on screen. We try to make these sessions educational and informative, but at the same time, out the back of it, we do get quite a lot of people that come to us and say, hey, could we have a chat about how you might be able to help us? So while I'm just talking, if you would like to have a no obligation chat about how we could help you, click very interested or somewhat interested. If you're not interested, fair enough. Thank you for joining anyway, and I hope it's useful. But otherwise, we will reach out to you to set something up, and we can have a no pressure, no obligation conversation with you. Just going to leave that on there for another 10 seconds or so. Looks like there's a few people interested in having a chat. There's quite a few people that haven't voted. There's a few stragglers there, probably just putting the cup of tea down and grabbing the mouse. So we'll just give it another 5 or so seconds, and I think that'll do us fine. So thank you very much for voting, and of course this was episode 2. Sorry, that's moved on. This is episode 2, but actually we've got another episode coming up on the 25th of March, same time, 11 o'clock until 11:30. This one's going to be different, and I think it's going to be interesting. Cyber risk management versus IT. What's the difference? As I've been saying through the first session of Cyber Uncovered and today, we're different to your MSP and your IT. But what we're going to do is we're going to invite an MSP, a guy called Alistair Huntingford from Endaxi, who we work alongside with lots of our clients, and we're going to talk about how we work together and what the differences are between what they offer, what we offer, and how we help protect firms together, if you like. So, we'll be advertising that soon. So please, if you can, sign up for it, and it will be available on demand as well. Just going to end by popping my details up there. If anybody didn't have a chance to vote or had a question that they wanted to email me with or give me a call that I haven't been able to get round to today, then please feel free to do that. So kerry.machin@mitigogroup.com, and there's my LinkedIn QR code as well. So thank you very much for joining. Sorry we've run over by a couple of minutes. Hopefully that was interesting and informative, and we'll see you again on the 25th of March. Goodbye now.